Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinar series. Today we got a really interesting topic, really cutting edge, trending. It's a new topic for us. It's a new topic for all of us. We're excited to get into it. New food laws. We do have a number of food laws that were implemented, and we'll get into that presentation in just a little bit. First, a little bit about the Small Business Development Center program. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center here at CSU Bakersfield, and we will be the host of today's webinar and actually present. With me, I have Elizabeth Hamlin, also with CSUB. So the SBDC is well represented in the webinar for you today. Across the country, we have 1,000 such centers, and you see our Central California Regional Network, which is one of 5 regional networks within California. 15 counties that encompass Central California. We serve SBDC clients from the bottom of Kern County to the top of Mono, east to actually the Nevada state line and to the Pacific Ocean. There you see the 3 massive territories that we serve as far as Kern, Inyo, and Mono. And a little bit of information and knowledge about the SBDC. We've got a number of impacts that we here in Kern County serve, and actually number of clients retained. These are some of our actual goals and what we shoot for is we really work to provide an economic development program in the county of Kern by assisting clients in the creation and retention of jobs, and also in attracting capital infusion and business starts into our community. So we do that with high quality business counseling. It is confidential. It is one-on-one, variety of different services that we can assist with a number of different consultants. And that consulting team is comprised of senior level consultants and also associate consultants, which are students at CSU Bakersfield in the School of Business and Public Administration. So they are seasoned yet energetic, well-educated, experience, unique skills, and then you couple that with our associate or junior consultants, and you have a great team. And that team is actually recognized by the state of California as being a wide and actual contributing factor. If you need more information from us, there's our website at csub.com. And you can go there to sign up for services, to talk more to a consultant about, and we do have ag restaurant consultants and others that can benefit your particular business and also any idea that you have moving forward. So our website, csubsbdc.com. And our next webinar is going to be on February 6th, and SBA funding opportunities. Lots of different funding opportunities, from debt to actual procurement to investment, and other things will be discussed that day. Coming forward in March and into the end of February, buying and selling a business. And also we'll be talking in March about America's $2.5 billion seed fund for businesses. Okay. Well, moving on with our particular topic today, we got a great topic. I'm really excited about this. Like I say, Elizabeth Hamlin is joining us, and we're going to be talking about a lot of the recent history with California food laws. And what you're going to see is you're going to see us talking about 2 specific ones that have actually been enacted on January 1st of this year. Specifically, those will be the Homemade Food Act. And also, we'll be talking a great deal about the catering, which is a bill that came out of the Health Food Department to assist a certain class of businesses. But there were a couple of others that we want to talk about. We want to avoid confusion with the Homemade Food Act and give you a little bit of example of what has happened since its enactment in January of 2013 with the Cottage Food Act, which is more geared towards snacks and other things. Whereas the Homemade Food Act, you'll find, is essentially a mini restaurant in your home. A couple of other laws that we'll just touch on very briefly are the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act and the Charitable Feeding Act. And Elizabeth, why don't you give us a little bit of information on AB 2178, the Charitable Feeding Law.
Thank you, Kelly. So a little bit about the Charitable Feeding Act. It's defined as an operation for food service that is for nonprofit and nonprofit and or charitable organizations. And this bill changes the previous law, which required a food facility to be used. It does depend on each of the types of organizations who are providing the food. And if you are providing charitable feeding, you must be registered with local enforcement agencies and need to comply with the local health department best practices. It does prohibit the use of temporary food facilities, and that does change the landscape for feeding people.
Yeah, and I think this law came about in talking with our health officials based on it was really restrictive for people to donate a lot of food to homeless and hungry and other individuals that were food challenged at the time. And essentially, many of those were diving into dumpsters and other sources to try to find some food, but yet we had restrictive food laws that actually made it tougher and created some liability or potential liability for individuals or organizations that really wanted to donate food that wasn't created in a commercial kitchen. So the charitable feeding law is one that is designed to make it easier to feed those individuals without having to assume the liability and other aspects that come with food that wasn't created potentially in a commercial kitchen. And another one that we're going to just kind of touch on, and there'll be more information, and really that's one thing that we're finding out is these laws were all enacted rather late in the year, around September, and what we're finding is a lot of them are going to require local governments to either opt in or act. And another one on that is the Street Selling Food Act, which is the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act, which encourages governments to determine local laws, but the state is, of course, providing some guidelines. So they're actually providing guidelines such as in California, you cannot ban vending in parks. So if you have parks that you can actually now vend legally, there's going to be a permitting process, there are going to be local rules, but there are going to be an opportunity to do this vending in parks. And also cities cannot determine where vendors operate unless there is health, safety, or welfare concerns. So that's kind of new to that. And then the last aspect is that, and again, I really want to make sure everyone is aware of this, that there are going to be local issues that come about. And the local issues are going to be the ones that actually decide what in each of your cities or counties, what is actually legal. So moving on to a couple of laws that were enacted this year. And the first is AB 2524. And it is for catering operations and host facilities and includes a definition of a food facility. We're going to try to include some definitions, but trying to cover a lot of material in a short amount of time is going to be difficult to provide all the definitions that are in the law. We will have available the slide deck presentation afterwards. There's going to be a lot of information we go through, so I want to make that available to you. Please go to the survey once we're complete and actually jump in and complete the survey and mention you would like a copy of the slide presentation today. We've intentionally created slides that you're going to be seeing that are temporarily or maybe permanently very wordy. So they're really wordy and they actually give a lot of detail, so they will assist you after the fact as well. And plus, this is being recorded and you can view it later. But a lot of the laws that we have right now that have been enacted, there's not total definition. And we'll get into some of that later. One of those is going to be AB 2524. And what it does is it provides essentially a host facility that is approved and permitted by the county as an off-site regulation. So this is going to come up mostly in facilities that actually are breweries or wineries. They could be spirits. It can be somebody who offers a different type. But in the past, when those types of entities wanted to actually serve food, they were bound by the old laws of a actual commercial kitchen. And not too many breweries or wineries really have that capability unless they actually sell on an ongoing basis. And many of the ones that we've talked to at the SBDC really don't want to get involved in that aspect. They're craft breweries, they're winemakers, and that's the passion that they want to come out in that particular business. So you'll see a definition here for a food facility is where food is served to the public on premise, such as a restaurant. The food facility falls under more stringent rules than a food processing facility, which is another definition that we look at. So again, tasting rooms, and again, if the food is prepared or sold at a brewery tasting room, the brewery must comply with the food facility regulations. And that even includes a cater or pop-up. The nice thing that is good also is that this is really a law that provides a lot of options, and it's the options moving forward that are really nice. Formally, a caterer would have to have a regular food facility license. So inside a brewery or a winery, you'd have to have special flooring, washable services, all the rules that a restaurant would have in order to do that. Now, breweries also have the option, and they've had it for a number of years, to actually sell prepackaged food or snacks, chips or pretzels or something along those lines. That hasn't changed. But as far as some of the other options to where now it makes it easier for a caterer to come into that operation and to actually sell food for a limited amount of time makes it very, very beneficial for that particular business.
And we are seeing local breweries opening up and with this model of wanting to have a caterer outside rather than deal with all of those regulations. So this has been super beneficial to them. And I just wanted to mention, if you have any questions, there is a Q&A box, and I encourage you to submit those. We will be answering questions at the end, and just if you raise your hand, we're not able to respond directly, but if you submit a question, we can get into that as soon as possible.
And we do hope to leave plenty of time for questions, because there will be, I'm sure, a lot of questions with a new law and ordinances like this. So here we're getting into some of the requirements, and, you know, really this will be for information for you. We can actually pass on the law and a few other things. So we'll have lots of opportunity for you to ask questions, and actually to present you with more materials in order to actually determine how your facility will actually fit with the new law. But the requirements are going to be basically those as any other. You'll see that they'll need to be, it'll need to be oftentimes food service operation and sinks and a lot of the other things that are set up. You know, when the health department gets involved in these rules and regulations, they're doing it for the benefit of everybody in society. And it is really, with a lot of these laws, it's really important to recognize that going in, and to recognize that foodborne illnesses do occur and they do happen. And so a lot of what we're doing and presenting here today is going to be on the business side of what you're doing, but really taking care of your business in a food operation is also making sure everything is sanitary and moving forward in that direction. So these are some of the requirements. We're not going to go into all of these because of time, but these are requirements that you're going to find that are going to be necessary of a host facility. So that's a little bit about the catering and as it pertains to brewery, winery, spirits. We'll see a group of businesses that this could pertain to. I know up the hill they're planning a tasting room in a city, which isn't really owned by the city or a particular winery or brewery. So the tasting room could fall into these regulations as well. So there'll be other businesses, but it's good to know that these are out here, and what they do is they provide a number of options that will be available to small businesses in this category to provide a better service. And I think it's always better when you have food with alcohol. So let's move on to our last two areas that we're going to talk about today. And what we're going to talk about are two very different laws. The Cottage Food Law from 2013, and we're going to talk about the newly enacted Micro Enterprise Kitchen. And on this slide, what we're going to do is just kind of compare what these laws are and how they're different. My understanding is these will not be able to be used in conjunction or association with each other. So one of them is going to have packaged, shelf-stable, low-risk foods that don't require to be refrigerated, such as the Cottage Food Law. And we have enough history from the Cottage Food Law to where we've seen where there's been a lot of successes. And I'm going to let Elizabeth talk about that in just a moment. The other is going to be the Micro Enterprise Law, which is going to be different, where you can actually turn your house into a sit-down restaurant or sell food to go with rules and regulations and being properly permitted and inspected. That's the key. You still have to be permitted. You still have to be inspected. But for a number of years, we've had a number of informal businesses that have operated selling tamales, selling dumplings, selling all kinds of food products. And it has been recognized by a number of individuals that really by actually allowing this activity to occur, that it's actually better to regulate and inspect these kitchens where this activity is helping, but also provide economic development benefits for people that want to start a micro business. And we're here to hopefully help with that. So here we'll talk a little bit about the Cottage Food Law, and then we'll get into the micro enterprise and allow some time for questions. Take it away, Elizabeth.
All right. So AB 1616, the California Cottage Food Act. I know a lot of us are going to be familiar with that act, and if you ever shop at a farmer's market, you'll see the homemade breads and jams and other things that are low-risk foods. This bill came around and was intended to promote small business during economic downturn, and also facilitating the healthy local homegrown food movement. As just mentioned, this bill came around because they found people selling bread to local restaurants and markets. So the thing about the cottage food operation, or the CFO, is these products cannot require refrigeration. And so you can bake cakes, but there can be no cream frosting. There can be no jellies that need to be refrigerated. And these items are packaged, let me go back one, packaged for sale to retail consumers. There are two different types of requirements. There's Class A and Class B, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the Class A is what you typically see at a farmer's market or community events, and a Class B license allows the producer to sell directly to consumers or to restaurants and grocery stores and other businesses to resell their products. There are requirements on labeling and packaging. It's all to promote transparency of the product. The benefits are there's a limited startup costs. You get to test your product on a small scale. So before you're investing in a commercial kitchen and spending copious amounts of money to try out your bakery business, you get your foot in the door and then test the market and potentially scale up. Also, who doesn't love working from home? So some cottage food operation successes in Kern County have been, Rig City roasting. Since this roasting coffee does not require refrigeration, Rig City started in their home with a Class A license. And from there, they have multiple locations now and successful operations. R.G. Russell was a Class B operation doing flavored almonds and selling them to restaurants or grocery stores and to consumers. Baking by Cat did her own bakery, and Front Porch Bakery in Tehachapi now has grown up into a commercial kitchen by testing the market out and moving forward there. So once again, CFOs, you must be on the approved food list, must adhere to zoning and planning requirements, and file a home occupation permit with the county. You have a limited amount of sales per year. And other agencies also may require additional licenses and permits, like the seller's permit, the business license. And you also, say you're selling at a farmer's market, you will have to require some kind of permit to be selling to the public in certain areas. Also, cottage food operations online sales are limited. There's another similarity between the two microenterprises and cottage food is there must be transparency online and in person that this was prepared in a home kitchen. So some of the concerns about cottage food operations with the public are the increased risk of foodborne illnesses, that this is a step back for public health, that these kitchens are not inspected routinely to ensure compliance, and it can limit the traceability of contaminated and recalled products. That's why we strongly encourage, and it's also a requirement for you to have a food safety handler's permit and all of these permits with the county to ensure you are operating in a legal way to reduce the amount of contamination where in the food chain. You know, that's one of the benefits of these laws, where we get to be more transparent about where our food's coming from. So these are a few things to consider. And here at the SBDC, we can help you. The CSUB SBDC or your own local SBDC can help you figure out how to become legal in these operations and assess the liability of this type of food operation. All right, and so Kelly, can you touch on the microenterprise a little bit with us?
I definitely will. But before we leave the cottage food, the cottage food operation was a very significant piece of legislation in 2013. And it really enabled a lot of people to work from their homes. It allowed people with maybe childcare concerns, maybe they had a disability, or a number of different reasons. They were able to vet their particular product and do it at home. And it came at a time that the legislation was passed in 2012 when we were coming out of a recession, and there was an opportunity to create more specialty food businesses. So it was really an important piece. It did have a lot of limitations based on the foods that could be done. There could be no meat, meaning there could be no tamales. Oh, darn. There could be no other really toxic or potential easily toxic, like acidity products like tomatoes. Seafood and other inspected meats, no way. So there was a lot of limitations that came out of cottage food that really helped move it forward. But what it did was it really created this movement for food sharing. And we've seen sharing actually occur in many other operations. We've seen it in vacation sharing with Airbnb. We've obviously seen auto sharing with ride sharing with Lyft and Uber. So we've seen a sharing economy that is coming our way. And this movement really started in about 2016. And I remember having lunch with Donna Fenton at the time, and we were talking about Josephine's, which was an online website that actually would be a third-party vendor toward home chefs in order to get them set up. Now, at the time, since this law wasn't enacted, it was illegal. And essentially, after a while, they ran into legal difficulties and are no longer in business. But the food sharing movement was born, and it kind of has moved into now what we call the micro enterprise home kitchen operations that was signed into law last year. So that is kind of the beginning of the micro enterprise home kitchen operation as a new type of retail food facility. Again, it can happen out of your home under a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different conditions that we'll get into right now. So you see the definition. It's a food facility. And again, we talked about some of the definitions we're not getting into. Food facility is one where you need to really look to see what is and what is not a food facility. But it is one that is operated by a resident in a private home where the food is stored, handled, and prepared and served that day to consumers. So it isn't something about making something and freezing it and selling it to someone else. It isn't, it is coming up with fresh food and ingredients. And hopefully that means coming up with new ethnic foods that maybe a lot of people aren't used to having. I remember reading in the Los Angeles Times about the same time when this movement was going on, about an individual who apparently made some of the best dumplings anywhere and would go onto Facebook and he would post where he was going to be in a shopping center, show up with dozens and dozens of these pot stickers, and literally sell out within 5 minutes. So this was the underground food movement that has got us to where we are now, to the approval process. Now, the hope is that by actually making this legal, again, what it does is it brings into light the actual need for this, but it also brings into line some accountability as far as health considerations. Micro enterprise home kitchens can only sell to the ultimate consumer. They cannot sell to wholesalers or third parties. And we'll get into some of the other rules and regulations as we go. But these things are really helpful for the actual accountability of the program. So this informal food sharing economy that I talk about, in a survey done by Cook Alliance, which is an excellent resource and one that you might want to go to if you're considering this online, is actually did a survey. And so who is it? And women constitute 84% of this. Of African, Hispanic, or multiracial descent, it's 48%. First generation immigrants, 30%. And household income, 45,000 and under, 36%. So you see the micro enterprise food that is actually such a great opportunity. So again, just so we're clear, it's operated in the residence of a private home. You can have an employee. You can have a full-time equivalent employee, which is, if you want, 4 10-hour employees per week. Could be 2 20s. Just get to 40 and you do the math, and it can be 1 full-time equivalent employee, but that is it. So nobody can work over 40 hours in that particular business a week. Food is prepared, and actually you can, because there are also some limitations as far as family members and the resident of the house and 1 full-time equivalent employee. So we mentioned that it's cooked, prepared, and served the same day. The nice thing is about the law is it's not too restrictive where it can be consumed on-site or off-site. If you want to set up a large dining room table in your kitchen or your garage or your backyard, I guess that's great. If you want them to actually come and pick up the food or deliver it, that's good too. So you have the flexibility of both of those two. There are still some foods that are going to be excluded, and those are ingredients that have a lot of raw dairy products, raw oysters, and a few other things. So you'll want to get into the products and see what is actually excluded. There's a limitation on the number of individual meals that can be served per day. Right now, it is 30 full meals or 60 partial meals from the understanding that I get. And also, there's a limit of 50,000 in annual sales. So actually, you know, the other key thing that is actually important is that counties can actually opt in or opt out. When they pass the law, they gave the 58 counties in California the option of adopting or not adopting this law. And right now, I think that there are a lot of counties who have not opted in. So that is something to keep in mind, whereas it might have passed the state law, but there might be some action needed locally if your county has not opted in. My understanding is Kern County is in on this. My understanding, if you go farther to the north of our region in Stanislaus County, they have not opted in. So we'll talk about that toward the end, about some things that can do. So again, we're talking about direct to consumer. It is okay to use actually a intermediary. So you can use a third party that actually is actually involved in the process. The third party must get a permit as well too. So you have somebody who acts as the coordinator. Maybe it's a website, an app, etc. But they are actually required to turn people in if they get over 3 complaints. One thing's for sure, if this is up and going and you're in business and you get complaints about either people getting sick or whatever, you're going to see the health department knock on your door. And it's going to affect your business. That is part of the accountability of why moving this into the forefront. So we mentioned the opt-in, opt-out. There are many commercial type rules for the facility. The facility will be inspected. You will have hot water. You will have a sink. You will have a lot of issues that come up. One issue you won't have come up is zoning though. And operating a home-based business, oftentimes communities run into zoning issues. There will be no zoning issues. There is no signage allowed outside. And really, the impact that you have on your neighborhood is going to affect the viability of a sustainable food business in this instance. So you can have delivery of food, but it's limited to a family member, an employee, or the permittee. So there's no going to Uber Eats and having your food delivered. So let's talk about the restaurant feasibility, because there are some concerns here. You could only gross $50,000 a year in sales. So how are you going to do this? This is kind of set up as a food or restaurant type incubator in many cases. It gives you the opportunity to do market research for a new operation. And because the fact that restaurants have such high initial cost and it is so expensive to get set up in there, you know, it gives you the chance to see, you know, if your business is going to scale up to where you can actually turn it into a larger operation. I like to call the next line that you get to kick the tires on a lifestyle. And for me, I come from a family that was operating a restaurant for 52 years. I have a son who's done a food truck and is soon to be in a restaurant. So I have a lot of experience in this, and the lifestyle is really something that works for some people, and for some people it doesn't. So you can determine if the lifestyle is going to work for you. And maybe your lifestyle is that you only want to do $50,000 a year, and maybe you just need a little bit of income. That is the one thing that's really important as well to note, is that how it fits between your own situation. And that's something we really talk about at the SBDC. So you can also find early adopters and also some real champions of your particular food. For example, financial backers, gain some experience. The great thing is you have a proof of concept moving forward. You're technically in business. When we look to fund restaurants, one of the hardest things is startup restaurants. If you operate one of these for 2 years and they're scaling toward a new business, we can use that as evidence that you have a proof of concept and you can actually feasibility grow into a full-size restaurant. But it's really important to learn the business aspect of this and to give yourself an opportunity to maybe manage personnel and actually see it from that point moving forward as you gather, you know, realistic research for your particular venture. Another model that might come up is maybe you don't want a restaurant. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe your spouse has income and you would just like to provide a little income for a particular hobby. You have an ethnic specialty, let's say gumbo. You're potentially French Canadian and you make some really good gumbo. So you want to get that out and maybe, take pride in serving your particular ethnic dish. And maybe that's a reason. So the secondary income could actually work. It could work if you are actually providing childcare. It could work if you're providing elder care. It could work if you have a disability, or if you just want a part-time venture and want to do something that contributes to the pride of you and your neighborhood, because it's going to be your neighbors that eat this food. So some of the other opportunities, let's say, for example, you would like some income as a retired chef or a restaurateur. You've operated your restaurant for a number of years and you want to downsize, you want to get out of it, but maybe there's 2 days a week you'd still like to do it. And you have specialty dishes that people crave and miss. So maybe there's that opportunity for a retired chef who's created some things, or the restaurateur. Potentially, it could be a social cause. Maybe you're a veteran, maybe a wounded warrior potentially, and you have a really nice dish to begin with, but there's reason and incentive for someone to want to buy from you for that particular cause. Who knows? Maybe nonprofits want to get involved and have, it's typically a for-profit business and it's an individual permittee. But if somebody wants to donate their profits to a nonprofit, for example, that might be other incentives. And I'm sure you have some other reasons out there on what you would like to see done too. Or maybe your situation is a little bit different.
And I'd like to add on that one of the purposes for this this bill is to encourage local food movement. And I know Kelly said that it's for creating the community and you're feeding your neighbors. So maybe it's an easy way to get into the local food movement and move through that avenue.
So let's get into the marketing and the business decisions, because there's a lot of business decisions. It's going to be a small business. And at the SBDC, we're here to help you. So there's a number of things that you're going to run into, typically what we face with larger restaurants and food businesses that we deal with. There's going to be issues as far as marketing. An online presence is going to be very valuable.
Absolutely.
Web, social media, app, third party are all going to be ways of getting your and also the review websites.
Mm-hmm.
Home-based businesses will pop up on Yelp. They will pop up potentially on Google Plus and other sources out there.
That's the nice thing about this micro enterprise home kitchen operation is you can advertise and you can work through these avenues where it was limited before on the cottage food side.
So that brings us to some of the business decisions you're going to have to make. You are going to be limited with $50,000 annually what you can produce. Maybe you start this in August of one year and you do 50,000 over the last 5 months of the year or so. And the next year, maybe you do 5 months and say, well, gee, I think I can scale this and take off. There's a lot of decisions that you're going to have to make. One of those is going to be insurances. And what are you going to have as far as liability insurance, workers' comp, auto insurance? If you're going to be delivering meals, are going to be a concern. There's sanitary concerns. The owner is going to be required to take a ServSafe class. And the ServSafe class is going to be beneficial. You might want to even promote your home-based business by showing kitchen photos and showing where the food is constructed and where the magic is created. Some of the financial considerations, I think some of the financial considerations that are going to be huge are going to be, number one, pricing, because you are going to be limited to 30 meals per day, 30 full meals. What you need is a real solid entree that's going to be able to attract enough money to make this worth your while. Typically, restaurants have, maybe a 10% profit margin. If your profit margin is 10%, if the amount that you profit after your $50,000 of gross is only $5,000, is it worth it? So really, pricing is going to be an enormous, and you really need to charge enough for that particular product in order to make enough to make it worth your while. Also, you're going to have to look into tax considerations. Now you have a business, and you also have a business running out of your house, so there's going to be some tax consequences, maybe some tax benefits of using your kitchen as for business purposes. There's going to be some legal considerations that you're going to want to look at, but really, is $50,000 going to be enough? So, getting into and looking again, just a few more things on the business side of things that I just want to make sure I touch on is that you still are going to need to, for the legal aspect, be licensed. Come to the Small Business Development Center. Let us help you with the financing if you need it. Let us help you with the marketing. Let us help you with all other aspects of this. But on the business side of things, let us see if you're going to make money. Let us figure out what you need. I like to meet with people that are going into this type of business and looking what your end is. What do you visualize in mind? Some people will come and they say, well, gee, I have $60,000 a year in expenses. I have to have $60,000 a year of income. Others will say, I only need $5,000 a year in income. So let's start with what your financial resources are and then try to see if this works for you. And there are other ways to do that. In Kern County, the Environmental Health Department is fantastic. Donna Fenton was going to join us today. She is retiring on Friday. She has been a very valuable county servant for over 30 years. We have done 2 or 3 webinars on the Cottage Food Law and other things, and they are really proactive in trying to help businesses succeed, food businesses in Kern County. Don't get me wrong, they will shut your business down fast, but the one thing I will admire is if there is a health issue that comes up, they will get you opened as quick as possible in order for you to get back on with business. So there's the address for the Kern County Environmental Health. Check out, if you're not in Kern County, Environmental Health in your area and see what they have and what they're doing on this, because again, although it was a state law, it's going to be implemented locally, and to opt in depends on what yours are actually doing. Okay, so what happens if your county does not opt in? You know, you can actually become an advocate for this particular rule in your county. It is important to you. If it's important to you in your county and you haven't opted in, then you're encouraged to, you know, advocate to those particular groups around you. What about if your organization, you have an organization that is in favor of implementation? You know, we had mentioned earlier a website that we used, and we encourage you to look at it, Cook Alliance, and they give you a lot of good ideas on how to try to, number one is to try to spread the word and to have organizational support. And lastly, even if your county does opt in, when your county opts in, please get the small business assistance support. It's free through the SBDC, and transitioning your business from an informal food business to a profit-seeking business requires a lot of steps and a lot of thought on your process that our seasoned consultants have been through dozens of times before. And that is true throughout the 15 county regions and includes our other centers in Modesto, Salinas, San Luis Obispo, and Fresno. So this leaves us a little bit of time for some questions and answers. We got almost 10 minutes left for questions and answers. So we do have some questions that are starting to come in, and we will address those. And also, if you have any questions on the business side of things, contact your local SBDC. So Elizabeth, let's start with a couple of questions that we have that have come in, and keep coming in with those questions.
All right, so we have some really good questions. We have some very specific questions. And so what we're going to do is try to answer the questions we can directly right now. And some of these very specific questions we might have to revisit with you after this presentation. Since we do have multiple consultants who work with food businesses and who have great experience in the packaging side. So one of our questions was regulations around containers used for repackaging. This is a question that our consultant can help you specify out of the law, and also with our connections to Kern County Public Health. So this next question is, with a homemade food kitchen, can I provide food to breweries?
And the answer to that is no. You would need a catering license in order to do that. And you cannot cater specifically with a home food permit. And the reason why is they cite that they want accountability and they want homemade kitchens serving their neighbors and individuals. And the accountability of where the food is produced gets lost when it is actually done through a catering operation by multiple sources. So if you and 4 others were to do that with the brewery, they would come back and say, gee, here's our problem, is we don't know where that particular food came from. So that is the reasoning that they say absolutely not from the home food kitchen.
Okay, so our next question is, I have a cottage bakery class B. Can I also get a micro enterprise kitchen permit so I may provide meals to seniors? So that goes into, are you able to work as both a cottage food business and a micro enterprise?
That is a good question. And that one will get into some of the rules and regulations that are defined from the charitable food giving as well. But you're probably going to, if it's going to be sold to seniors, that's different. So don't have a great answer for that one right now, but we will try to get, and that is maybe something only environmental health will be able to answer for you once it happens. But right now, the micro enterprise kitchen permit is pretty limited to selling to individuals. In the law, they like to refer to them as your neighbors. And seniors could be your neighbors. So that is going to be really a good question. Thank you for asking. Here's our next question. Our next question, are mobile food facilities such as food trucks or food carts allowed to sell food outside of breweries or urban wineries? And I'll answer this one, Elizabeth. I know you're chomping at the bit over there, but yes, permitted mobile food facilities that have been inspected and that are licensed can operate on private property. And that even includes, so whereas we might not have touched so much on that, but mobile food facilities actually can, that are permitted and have an active permit, those vendors operating those particular units, and they must have access to a commercial restroom and hot water while you're at the brewery.
Okay. So let's see, what is considered a partial meal versus a full meal?
Boy, you guys are chock full of good questions. When I read this, what I interpreted from it was, and let's use something we're all familiar with. Let's use Mexican food. I looked at an entree as being a full meal, being an entree, a couple of side dishes, etc. That is being a full meal, which you can have 30 of them. However, maybe you make a very specific nachos, and the nachos can be a large serving, but for my definition of that, that would be kind of like the half serving of where you can maybe have 60 of those meals. I think it's going to come down to individually that interview and what is adopted locally. And again, since this only passed January 1, and a number of counties still in California have indicated or not indicated whether they're going to participate or opt in. It's the thought that most are going to opt in, and plus it's because this is the food sharing movement, so it's a movement. And even if they don't, initially opt in, there's going to probably be pressure for them to do so. So they will be able to answer that in better detail. But from my understanding, that is what we are actually seeing there. Okay.
So, yeah, our next question is if say you have a restaurant and you do already have your health permit, do you also need a catering permit to provide catering? Kelly, how do you feel on that one?
If you already have a restaurant,
yes,
and have a health food permit, do you need a catering permit if you want to provide catering? My understanding is it varies by county to county, but I would think that in most cases you are going to be required to have a catering permit since it is separate. But the fact that you have a restaurant, you have an approved kitchen, and I imagine the catering permit is is not a difficult process and a difficult additional permit. So it's going to probably vary by county, but I would assume in most cases a catering permit is separate given the different changes of serving food off-site than on-site. So, and although you already have the approved kitchen, I imagine it's just a process of going through that particular permitting.
And it does come down to what kind of vehicle you're using and the state of that vehicle, as you can't use certain vehicles that you say you'd use to move your family in. So that is another part of the catering process. So going into our next questions, this is an interesting question. If the county opts in, can the city I live in ban or opt out?
Well, since environmental health is done on a county basis, and I would think that the opting in is going to be done on a county level. There could be, let's say the county doesn't opt in, there could be pressure from the city, but since all the registration process generally flows through a county rather than a city for this, you know, I would guess no, but I can't give you a definitive answer. So I think that since county environmental health departments, and these are groups that meet together, all these 58 officials meet regularly and discuss issues that they have within each of their counties. And so I would think if the county opts in, the city cannot opt out.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
Oh, Claudia asked a question, is 50,000 the maximum profit you can make a year? Well, that is the maximum profit, 50,000, but that would be if you didn't have any expenses. So 50,000 is the maximum sales. So then you're going to have expenses based on that. And also in order to, it's really why pricing is so important on this, is that, and quality ingredients, is that you really need to be able to price a premium for these products. Hope that answered that question. See if we have time for one more.
All right. So it looks like we have time for maybe one more.
Okay, are we able to have a pop-up taco cart in Kern County? The answer to that would be most likely yes. Again, you're going to have a commissary to where that is actually prepared in, a commercial kitchen. You're not going to be able to prepare it from the cart. It's going to have to be prepared in a licensed and approved kitchen. You're going to have to go through the license permit of it, but then to actually take it to the cart, yes. But if you were planning on preparing the food from the cart on the sidewalk, most likely not. So, well, that's a great response. Thank you for the fine questions. We have some other webinars coming up real soon. If you want a handout of these slides, if you have any specific questions, we can get you specific answers. You can keep those coming. You can put them on the survey when you do the survey. So that is all the time we have for today. For Elizabeth Hamlin, I'm Kelly Bearden. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Keep your questions and surveys coming, and we will see you on February 6th for SBA funding opportunities with Mr. Keith Price. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye now.